On a crisp autumn morning in London, Jake Morrison strolled through the bustling streets near Buckingham Palace, his expensive phone held high as he recorded yet another TikTok video. The 23-year-old American tourist from Ohio had been in London for just 3 days, but he was already obsessed with becoming the next viral sensation on social media. Jake wasn't alone on his quest for internet fame. His two college friends, Mike and Chris, had joined him on this European adventure, serving as his personal camera crew and cheerleaders for his increasingly outrageous pranks. Their previous videos of Jake pretending to faint in front of Big Ben and dancing inappropriately at Tower Bridge had gained some attention, but not the millions of views he desperately craved. That morning, Jake woke up with a burning desire to create something extraordinary. As he scrolled through his social media feed in his budget hotel room, he noticed how videos involving the Queen's royal guards consistently went viral. People seemed fascinated by these stoic figures in their distinctive red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. "Guys, I got the perfect idea," Jake announced to his friends over breakfast at a small cafe near Victoria Station. "We're going to make the guard break character. Nobody's ever managed to do that successfully." Mike and Chris exchanged worried glances but didn't protest. They had learned that once Jake set his mind on something, there was no talking him out of it. The trio arrived at Buckingham Palace around 9 a.m., joining the growing crowd of tourists taking photos and selfies. Jake spent the first hour observing the guards, studying their routines, and plotting his approach. He noticed how other tourists would pose beside the guards, make funny faces, or try to make them laugh, all while maintaining a respectful distance. But Jake wasn't interested in being respectful. His previous pranks had taught him that shock value was the key to viral success. As he watched a young guard standing perfectly still at his post, Jake's mind began formulating an increasingly dangerous plan. "This guy won't even blink," Jake whispered to his friends, filming a test video of himself making faces at the guard. "But I bet I know what would make him move." His eyes darted to the coffee shop across the street, and a mischievous grin spread across his face. Mike, the more sensible of his friends, grabbed Jake's arm. "Whatever you're thinking, don't do it," he warned. "These guys aren't just tourist attractions, they're real soldiers." But Jake shrugged off his friend's concern, too focused on his potential moment of fame to consider the consequences. The morning grew warmer, and more tourists gathered around the palace gates. Jake noticed how the guard, later identified as Private James Harrison, remained perfectly composed despite the growing crowd and rising temperature. Private Harrison was relatively new to his position, having completed his training just 6 months earlier, but his dedication to duty was evident in his unwavering stance. What Jake didn't know was that Private Harrison had dreamed of serving in the Queen's Guard since childhood. Coming from a military family in Newcastle, he had worked tirelessly to earn his position, viewing it as not just a job but a sacred duty to uphold centuries of tradition and protect the royal family. As Jake continued his reconnaissance, he overheard tour guides explaining to visitors that the Queen's Guards were elite soldiers, highly trained and authorized to react if threatened. But this information went in one ear and out the other. Jake was too busy imagining the millions of views his ultimate prank would generate. Around 11:30 a.m., Jake made his move toward the coffee shop across the street. "Start recording," he commanded his friends, pulling out his wallet. "This is going to be epic." Chris reluctantly raised his phone while Mike made one last attempt to talk sense into his friend. "This isn't like our other pranks, Jake," Mike pleaded. "We could get into serious trouble here." But Jake was already inside the coffee shop, ordering the largest cup of hot coffee they had available. His hands trembled with excitement as he paid, not from nervousness about the act he was about to commit, but from anticipation of the social media fame he believed would follow. Little did Jake Morrison know that his next actions would not only ruin his vacation, but would also change his life forever. In his blind pursuit of viral fame, he was about to learn a harsh lesson about respect, consequences, and the serious nature of assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard. The large coffee cup felt warm in Jake's sweaty palms as he emerged from the coffee shop. Steam rose from the small opening in the lid, carrying the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee into the cool London air. His friends, Mike and Chris, stood nervously at the corner, their phones already recording what they feared would become evidence rather than entertainment. Jake had spent the last 30 minutes attempting to provoke a reaction from Private Harrison. He had tried waving his hands in front of the guard's face, making silly faces, and even doing ridiculous dances, all standard tourist behavior that the guards were trained to ignore. But Jake's growing frustration with these failed attempts only fueled his determination to do something more extreme. As he waited for the perfect moment, Jake noticed a young family approaching the guard to take photos. He watched as their small daughter, probably no more than 6 years old, politely stood beside the guard while her parents snapped pictures. The guard maintained his professional composure, but a slight softening around his eyes revealed his humanity, a detail Jake completely missed in his obsession with creating viral content. "This is boring," Jake complained to his friends, pacing back and forth with the coffee cup. "Nobody wants to see another video of someone just standing next to these guys. We need something shocking, something nobody's ever done before." His voice carried across the courtyard, drawing disapproving looks from other tourists who were respectfully observing the centuries-old tradition. Mike made one final attempt to reason with his friend. "Think about it, man. That coffee is really hot. You could seriously hurt someone." But Jake was beyond listening. His social media metrics have been dropping lately, and he was desperate to regain his momentum. The possibility of injury or consequences didn't register in his mind, clouded by visions of millions of views and viral fame. The tension built as Jake positioned himself closer to Private Harrison. Other tourists began to notice his strange behavior, some even moving away from the area. A street vendor selling Union Jack souvenirs watched the scene unfold with growing concern, having witnessed enough tourist mischief to recognize when something was about to go wrong. Chris's hands shook as he continued filming, torn between loyalty to his friend and the knowledge that what was about to happen was seriously wrong. "Jake, please," he whispered, but Jake had already started his approach, holding the coffee cup like a weapon. Private Harrison remained motionless at his post, but his military training had already alerted him to the potential threat. Through his peripheral vision, he could see Jake's unusual movements and the suspicious way he was handling the coffee cup. Years of training had taught him to stay alert while appearing completely stoic. The autumn breeze carried snippets of concerned whispers from the gathering crowd. An elderly British couple nearby began signaling to a police officer who was patrolling at the far end of the square. Time seemed to slow down as Jake took his final steps toward the guard. What Jake didn't realize was that several CCTV cameras were tracking his every move. In the palace security room, operators had already noticed his suspicious behavior and were monitoring the situation closely. They had seen countless tourists attempt to provoke the guards over the years, but something about Jake's body language set off warning bells. The coffee in Jake's cup sloshed dangerously close to the rim as he moved. The temperature of the liquid was still well above 150 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause serious burns. Private Harrison could feel the heat radiating from the cup as Jake drew nearer, but his training prevented him from breaking his stance, even in the face of imminent danger. Mike had stopped filming and was now frantically texting their other friends back in Ohio, sensing that they might need help dealing with whatever fallout was about to occur. The street vendor had picked up his phone, his finger hovering over the emergency dial button. In these final moments before the incident, Jake's mind raced with thoughts of social media glory. He imagined the headlines, the shares, the followers, but not once did he consider the real human being standing before him, the dedicated soldier who had sworn an oath to serve with honor and dignity. The atmosphere around Buckingham Palace grew thick with anticipation as Jake prepared to commit an act that would transform him from an attention-seeking tourist into something far more serious, an assailant about to attack a member of the Queen's Guard. At precisely 11:45 a.m., the peaceful morning atmosphere around Buckingham Palace shattered. Jake Morrison, his judgment clouded by dreams of social media fame, committed an act that would change multiple lives in mere seconds. With his phone in one hand and the scalding coffee in the other, he stepped directly in front of Private Harrison. "This is going viral," Jake shouted, and without any further warning, he flung the entire cup of hot coffee directly into the guard's face. The liquid splashed across Private Harrison's face, soaking through his ceremonial uniform and running down his chest. Steam rose from the red fabric as horrified gasps erupted from the crowd. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The coffee cup fell to the ground in slow motion, bouncing once before rolling away. Droplets of brown liquid glistened in the air, catching the morning sunlight before splattering across the pristine courtyard stones. The scene was like a terrible painting coming to life. Private Harrison's training was immediately put to the ultimate test. The coffee was scorching, Later medical reports would show it was hot enough to cause first-degree burns. Despite the searing pain, his military discipline held firm for crucial seconds. His eyes stung, and his skin burned, but he maintained his composure long enough for the proper security response to activate. The crowd's reaction was immediate and intense. Children began crying, tourists screamed, and several people instinctively rushed forward to help the guard. Phones were raised everywhere, but not to capture entertainment. They were documenting a crime. The street vendor who had been watching earlier was already on the phone with emergency services. Jake's triumphant grin disappeared quickly as he realized the gravity of what he had just done. The guard's face was bright red, and despite his incredible discipline, signs of pain were evident in his tightly clenched jaw. The sound of running boots and shouting filled the air as other guards and police officers converged on the scene. It was just a joke. Jake yelled, backing away as two police officers approached him with stern expressions. His friends, Mike and Chris, stood frozen in shock, their phones still recording what had transformed from a prank video into criminal evidence. Mike's face had gone pale, while Chris looked like he might be sick. Within 30 seconds of the incident, 4 additional Royal Guards had appeared, moving with precision to secure the area. Their usual ceremonial pace was replaced by rapid, professional movement. 2 of them immediately escorted Private Harrison inside for medical attention, while the others maintained a secure perimeter around the scene. Tourist Sarah Chen, a visiting doctor from Singapore, pushed through the crowd offering medical assistance. His eyes need to be flushed immediately, she called out to the approaching medical team. That coffee was steaming hot. There could be serious burns. Jake attempted to flee when he saw more police officers arriving, but the crowd had become an unwitting barrier. Several tourists blocked his path, and one large man from Australia deliberately stepped in front of him. "You're not going anywhere, mate," the Australian said firmly, crossing his arms. The police reached Jake moments later. "Put your hands behind your back," commanded Officer Davies, a veteran of the London Metropolitan Police. Jake tried to protest, but his words were drowned out by the angry shouts from the crowd. His phone clattered to the ground as the officers handcuffed him. Inside the palace gates, Private Harrison was receiving immediate medical attention. Despite the pain, he remained stoic as medics examined his face and eyes. His fellow guards stood nearby, their usual expressionless faces now showing concern for their colleague. The burned guard's first words were not about his pain, but rather asking if he had maintained his position properly before being relieved. Back in the courtyard, Jake was being led to a police car. His friends were surrounded by officers taking statements, their faces showing the dawning realization that their London vacation had turned into a legal nightmare. Tourists continued filming as Jake was placed in the back of the police car, his head bowed in shame. The entire incident had lasted less than 5 minutes, but its consequences would extend far beyond that morning. As the police car drove away, carrying a now sobbing Jake Morrison, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind a coffee-stained courtyard and a shocking story that would soon make headlines around the world. Private Harrison's dedication to duty in the face of assault would become a testament to the professionalism of the Queen's Guard, while Jake's actions would serve as a stark warning about the dangers of seeking social media fame at any cost. 8. The first hour after the coffee attack unfolded in a whirlwind of activity across multiple locations in London. At the Central London police station, Jake Morrison sat in a holding cell, his designer clothes now wrinkled and his face streaked with tears. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in as he heard officers discussing charges of assault against a member of the Queen's Guard. Meanwhile, at St. Thomas Hospital, Private James Harrison underwent treatment for his injuries. The medical team worked carefully to assess the burns on his face and neck. Despite the pain, he maintained his military bearing, answering the doctor's questions with "yes, sir," and "no, sir." The attending physician, Dr. Rachel Thompson, was impressed by his composure. "These burns are first degree, with some second-degree patches," Dr. Thompson explained to the military officers who had accompanied Harrison. "He's lucky his eyes weren't more seriously damaged. The coffee temperature was just below the point that would have caused third-degree burns." Back at Buckingham Palace, the scene of the crime had transformed into a hive of investigative activity. Forensics officers photographed the coffee stains on the ground, measured distances, and collected the discarded coffee cup for evidence. The palace's security team was reviewing CCTV footage, which had captured the entire incident from multiple angles. Jake's friends, Mike and Chris, found themselves in an interrogation room, their phones confiscated as evidence. They nervously explained to Detective Inspector Sarah Brooks how they had tried to discourage Jake's increasingly risky behavior over the past few days. "We should have tried harder to stop him," Mike said, his voice trembling. "He kept talking about going viral, getting more followers. It was like he was obsessed." Chris nodded in agreement, adding that Jake had been acting more recklessly since their arrival in London. Social media was already exploding with videos of the incident. Tourist footage from different angles flooded Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. News websites began picking up the story, with headlines highlighting the shocking nature of the attack and the guards' professional response. In the palace's administrative offices, senior military officials were dealing with the diplomatic aspects of the incident. The American embassy had been notified, and discussions were underway about the legal proceedings against a U.S. citizen who had assaulted a member of the Queen's Guard. Private Harrison's family in Newcastle received the news via official military call. His father, a former soldier himself, listened gravely to the details before asking just one question: "Did my son hold his position?" When told that James had maintained his post until properly relieved, despite the burns, a note of pride entered his voice. The street vendor who had witnessed the build-up to the incident gave his statement to the police. "I could see it coming," he explained. "The young man was acting strange, getting too close to the guard. 20 years I've been selling here, and you learn to spot the troublemakers." In the hospital's break room, nurses discussed the incident while watching the news coverage. Can you imagine standing there, not moving, while someone throws burning hot coffee in your face? One nurse asked. "The discipline these guards have is incredible." Jake's social media accounts, which he had hoped would explode with viral fame, instead filled with thousands of angry comments condemning his actions. His latest video, posted just hours before the incident, showed him bragging about his planned epic prank. Platform moderators were already moving to suspend his accounts for promoting harmful behavior. Dr. Thompson finished treating Private Harrison's burns and prepared his discharge papers. "You'll need to apply this ointment every 4 hours," she instructed, "and return tomorrow for a follow-up." Harrison nodded, his face still red but his dignity intact. 2 senior officers waited to escort him back to the barracks, where his fellow guards had prepared a quiet welcome. As the afternoon approached, the initial shock of the morning's events began to settle into a more organized response. Police prepared formal charges, medical staff documented injuries, military officials drafted reports, and diplomatic channels hummed with activity. What Jake had intended as a few seconds of viral fame had set in motion a complex chain of events that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. In his cell, Jake asked to make a phone call. As he waited, he could hear other officers talking about his case. The words assault, international incident, and prison time drifted through the hallway, each one making him sink further into despair. His dream of social media stardom had turned into a nightmare, and the worst was yet to come. By late afternoon, Jake Morrison's world had completely unraveled. Sitting in the interview room at the police station, he faced Detective Inspector Helen Matthews, a veteran officer who had dealt with numerous tourist incidents, though none quite like this. The gravity of his situation became painfully clear as she read out the charges. "Mr. Morrison, you are being charged with assault causing actual bodily harm, harassment of a Crown official, and disturbing the peace," Detective Matthews stated firmly. "These are serious offenses under British law." Jake's court-appointed lawyer. The evidence against Jake was overwhelming. Multiple CCTV cameras had captured the incident from different angles, showing clear premeditation. Dozens of tourist videos provided additional perspectives, and the medical report from Private Harrison's treatment detailed the extent of his burns. The coffee shop had even provided receipts showing Jake had specifically requested the coffee at its hottest temperature. Meanwhile, at the American embassy, consular officials were reviewing Jake's case. While they would provide basic assistance as they would for any U.S. citizen arrested abroad, they made it clear to Jake's parents during a phone call that they could not intervene in the British legal process. His mother broke down crying when she learned her son could face up to 2 years in prison. Jake's friends had been released after giving their statements, but were told not to leave the country. Their own social media accounts were flooded with messages from people back home, forcing them to shut down their profiles. The hotel where they were staying asked them to check out early after receiving numerous complaints from other guests who had recognized them from the viral videos. In the military barracks, Private Harrison was visited by his commanding officer. Despite his injuries, Harrison insisted he could return to duty the next day. The officer commended his dedication but ordered him to take 3 days of medical leave. "Your actions today brought honor to the regiment," the officer told him. "The way you maintained your composure under assault has not gone unnoticed." The media coverage intensified as evening approached. British newspapers prepared their morning headlines, with one tabloid already running with "Guards cough at the horror. American tourists SAMEFULATTACK." International news outlets picked up the story, focusing on the broader implications for tourism and respect for traditional institutions. Jake's social media dreams had turned into a different kind of viral sensation. His name trended worldwide, but not in the way he had hoped. Social media platforms permanently banned his accounts for promoting harmful behavior, and videos of his previous pranks were removed. Digital marketing companies that had been considering him for sponsorship deals quickly distanced themselves. The police investigation revealed more troubling details. A search of Jake's phone showed he had researched other pranks targeting royal guards, including several dangerous stunts that have been reported in recent years. His internet history revealed multiple searches for how to make a guard move and most viral guard pranks. Late in the evening, Jake was formally charged and transferred to a holding facility. His passport was confiscated and bail was set at £50,000, an amount his parents would struggle to raise. Mr. Richardson explained that even if bail was posted, Jake would not be allowed to leave the country before his trial. The coffee shop where Jake had purchased the weapon for his assault released a statement distancing themselves from the incident. They announced changes to their cup labeling to include more prominent warning about hot liquid temperatures and pledged to donate a week's profits to a military veterans charity. As night fell over London, the consequences of Jake's actions continued to ripple outward. Tourism officials prepared new guidelines for visitor behavior around royal guards, and the palace announced increased security measures. Private Harrison's story of stoic professionalism in the face of assault became a talking point in military training discussions. Jake spent his first night in custody reflecting on how quickly his life had changed. His dream of social media fame had lasted less than 30 seconds, but the repercussions would affect him for years to come. As he lay on the thin mattress in his cell, he could hear other detainees talking about that American who attacked the guard. His fame had come, but not in the way he had imagined. The day's events would serve as a stark reminder that actions driven by the pursuit of viral fame could have very real, very serious consequences. Jake Morrison had wanted to be remembered, and now he would be, but as a cautionary tale about respect, responsibility, and the high price of thoughtless actions. 1 week after the coffee assault incident, Jake Morrison stood in the Westminster Magistrates' Court, looking nothing like the confident prankster who had strutted around Buckingham Palace. His designer clothes had been replaced by a somber grey suit borrowed from his lawyer, and dark circles under his eyes revealed sleepless nights in custody. The courtroom was packed with their house to pay for his legal defense, sat in the front row. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a ray. Crown Prosecutor Elizabeth Blackwood presented the case methodically. The evidence was damning: crystal clear CCTV footage, dozens of witness statements, medical reports detailing Private Harrison's burns, and Jake's own social media history showing premeditation. Most damaging was the recovered video from Jake's phone, showing him planning the assault while laughing about potential views and likes. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Blackwood addressed the court, "this was not a mere prank gone wrong. This was a calculated assault on a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, performed solely for the defendant's social media gratification." Private Harrison suffered first and second-degree burns while maintaining his post with admirable discipline. Private Harrison himself appeared in court, his face still showing faint signs of redness from the burns. He testified with military precision, describing the incident without emotion or embellishment. When asked about the impact of the attack, he spoke only of his concern about maintaining his position and upholding the dignity of his unit. Jake's defense lawyer, Mr. Richardson, did his best with a difficult case. He emphasized Jake's youth, his clean prior record, and his immediate remorse after the incident. "My client has learned a harsh lesson about the consequences of social media-driven behavior," he argued. He wishes to make full restitution and offers his sincere apologies to Private Harrison and the entire Royal Guard. When given the opportunity to speak, Jake's voice trembled as he addressed the court. "I don't know what I was thinking," he admitted. "I was so focused on getting views that I forgot I was dealing with a real person. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His words echoed in the silent courtroom, but the judge's expression remained stern. During a break in proceedings, conversations in the courthouse corridors revealed the broader impact of the case. Tourism officials discussed new security measures being implemented around royal sites. Military representatives talked about using the incident in training materials. Social media experts debated the growing problem of dangerous behavior motivated by online fame. Judge Margaret Winters listened to character witnesses, including Jake's former teachers and his parish priest, who had flown in from Ohio. They spoke of a generally good young man who had become obsessed with internet fame. The judge also reviewed letters from military veterans and cultural preservation groups, all calling for a sentence that would deter similar incidents. The prosecution presented evidence of the incident's wider impact: increased security costs at royal sites, psychological effects on other guards who now faced greater anxiety about potential attacks, and a negative impact on tourism as some visitors now felt less safe around popular landmarks. As the day wore on, the legal arguments focused on precedent cases involving assaults on public servants and military personnel. The prosecution pushed for a custodial sentence, arguing that anything less would fail to deter similar attention-seeking behavior. The defense pleaded for suspended sentence, citing Jake's youth and potential for rehabilitation. Jake's parents watched anxiously as their son's fate hung in the balance. Their savings were depleted from legal fees and travel costs, and they worried about how a criminal record would affect their son's future. His mother had already lost her job due to stress and media attention back home. Late in the afternoon, various officials presented impact statements. A palace representative discussed the effect on royal security protocols. A military officer explained how the incident had affected guard recruitment and training. A medical expert detailed the potential long-term effects of coffee burns to the face and eyes. As the court day drew to a close, tension filled the room. Jake sat with his head bowed, occasionally glancing at his parents or his lawyer. The judge announced she would deliver her verdict and sentence the following morning, leaving Jake to spend one more night wondering if his quest for viral fame would cost him his freedom. The case had become more than just the trial of one foolish tourist. It had evolved into a referendum on the dangers of social media fame-seeking and the importance of respecting historical institutions and the people who serve them. 6 months after the infamous coffee incident, the landscape around Buckingham Palace had changed in subtle but significant ways. New signs warned tourists about respectful behavior, additional security personnel patrolled the grounds, and barriers kept visitors at a safer distance from the royal guards. The coffee incident had left its mark on both the institution and the individuals involved. Jake Morrison had sur le resemblant. Private James Harrison had recovered fully from his physical injuries and received a commendation for his conduct during the incident. His story became part of Royal Guard training, teaching new recruits about maintaining composure under extreme circumstances. He was promoted to Lance Corporal and often gave talks to military cadets about duty and discipline. The incident sparked lasting changes in social media policies. Major platforms implemented stricter rules about prank content, particularly involving public servants or military personnel. Content creators who promoted dangerous stunts faced account suspensions and demonetization. The term "coffee guard incident" became shorthand for social media stunts gone wrong. Jake's friends, Mike and Chris, had their own struggles to overcome. Though they avoided legal consequences, their association with the incident followed them. They lost social media followers, job opportunities, and friendships. Their experience became a cautionary tale about the responsibility of bystanders to prevent harmful behavior. Back in London, the coffee shop near Buckingham Palace had transformed the incident into a positive change. They launched a Respect and Remember campaign, donating a portion of their profits to military charities. Their cups now carried messages about respecting public servants and thinking before acting. Jake's parents had slowly rebuilt their lives after mortgaging their house for his defense. His mother found new employment, though at a lower salary, and his father worked overtime to manage the additional debt. Their relationship with Jake remained strained, but was slowly healing through family counseling. The incident had unexpected ripple effects through popular culture. Documentary filmmakers contacted Jake for interviews about social media addiction and the pursuit of viral fame. He declined most requests but eventually agreed to participate in an educational video for schools about the consequences of reckless behavior. Private Harrison received hundreds of letters of support from around the world. Many praised his discipline, while others shared their own stories of maintaining composure in difficult situations. He responded to some, particularly those from young people interested in military service, sharing lessons about duty and responsibility. Tourism around Buckingham Palace adjusted to the new normal. Tour guides incorporated the incident into their stories, using it to illustrate the serious nature of the Royal Guard's duties. Visitors showed greater respect, and incidents of harassment decreased significantly. Jake's attempt at rehabilitation included speaking at high schools about the dangers of social media obsession. Initially met with skepticism, his raw honesty about his mistakes and their consequences eventually resonated with students. He became an unlikely advocate for digital responsibility and impulse control. The legal system used the case to establish new precedents for social media-motivated crimes. Judges in similar cases cited the Morrison decision when considering sentences for attention-seeking offenses. The case appeared in law school textbooks as an example of how modern technology could influence criminal behavior. 1 year after the incident, Jake received an unexpected letter. It was from Private Harrison, responding to Jake's written apology. The guard's message was brief but impactful. Learn from this, improve yourself, and ensure others learn from your mistake. Jake framed the letter in his room as a daily reminder of how one moment of thoughtlessness had changed so many lives. As time passed, the incident became more than just a viral moment or a cautionary tale. It sparked important discussions about responsibility in the digital age, respect for tradition, and the real-world consequences of virtual fame-seeking. Jake Morrison's 5 seconds of infamy had created lasting change, though not in the way he had originally intended. The coffee incident, as it came to be known, served as a powerful reminder that in an age of instant fame and viral content, real human dignity and respect should never be sacrificed for likes and views. The story of the tourist who threw hot coffee at a royal guard became a lesson taught in schools, discussed in boardrooms, and remembered by anyone tempted to push the boundaries of acceptable behavior in pursuit of social media glory.